Hello and welcome to another episode of the CyberDudes podcast. My name is Robin Thornton, and if you are a regular viewer, you might be wondering where Omar is today. Well, this week we didn't have time to record a news segment, so we are going to be jumping straight into our feature for the week, which is an interview with incident responder and security ops specialist Quinlan Varcoe. But before we get into that, a quick message that helps you support the show. Now, with trade tariffs having taken effect in recent weeks, many people are concerned about the costs of goods, particularly in the grocery stores, considering that much of the produce in the United States comes from Mexico and Canada. If you are one of those people who has concerns about how much you are paying at the supermarket, then you may be interested in the Amex Blue Cash Preferred card, for which we have a referral offer down in the show notes. With the Amex Blue Cash Preferred card, you can get 6% back on your grocery bills, as well as another 3% at the pump when you fill up the car. Not only that, but if you sign up using the offer code in the show notes below and spend $3,000 in the first 6 months, you will get a $250 cash back bonus. $3,000 in the first 6 months, with the current prices of eggs still being absolutely sky high, that shouldn't be a difficult task. So that, once again, is the Amex Blue Cash Preferred card down in the show notes there. And everyone who signs up, obviously, we do get a bit of a kickback, but that all goes back into supporting the production and sponsorship of the show. Okay, we'll jump straight into our feature for this week. Quinlan Varcoe.
We are joined today by security ops and incident response expert Quinlan Varcoe. Quinlan, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks.
We're just going to jump straight into this. If I've read this right, you've been in the cyber industry for getting on about 6 or so years now, at least like that's reading from your LinkedIn. But you've got a hell of a resume behind you for saying that kind of period of time. So I'm sure you've seen some stuff. I wanted to get straight into this and just ask, like, what's the craziest cyber attack you've seen so far, or cyber incident?
Yeah, sure. So we handle like all sorts of crazy ransomware and other types of incidents, and deal with like nation state actors targeting all different sizes of organizations. But I think maybe one of the more interesting ones, we were contracted with a bank, and I was tasked with doing the incident handling for them for this particular incident. And I think this one, I think maybe is the most fun for me, just because of how I was investigating it. Another department, actually, the mailroom, had received some kind of notice that they had to send out mail for loan denials. So this bank handles small loans, like a few $1,000s of loans per loan, and they were getting like an influx of hundreds of thousands of loan denials all of a sudden, and I was essentially brought in to figure out what was going on, and we had to actually track what was generating the loan denial. And so it didn't come up as like something in a SIM. It came up through another department. Is it just a seemingly like, oh, maybe a system broke. We don't really know what's going on. And the mailroom was kind of running the investigation because they didn't know it was a cyber issue. And so when I came in, they're like, oh yeah, maybe there's some kind of IT issue. We don't know. Immediately you could tell it was something suspicious, because they were going from like maybe like a few thousand denials a day to like 300,000. It was like a huge spike in activity. And we actually ended up figuring out that they had a loan pre-approval application, and these threat actors found a way to exploit the cookie, because there was I'm forgetting the word, like that cookie didn't expire, and so the threat actor could stay on the same page and submit like thousands of requests to the API at one time. And they were actually brute forcing social security numbers, and so they would take somebody's like name and address, and then they would guess the last 4 digits of their social, and if they got those right, it would actually give them their social security number, and it would give them a loan at that bank. And so we had to kind of track this back. Yeah.
That's wild.
Do you have questions?
No, I'm just I get a loan, like guess the last 4, and then you get free money. That's
Yeah,
nuts.
basically. Yeah, and the way that that was working is, I mean, there's really only 9,999 possible guesses, and so
Mhm.
you take somebody's name and address, you make a few thousand guesses in a few minutes, and there you go. You got somebody's bank account. You get their identity basically.
That's absolutely nuts. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that that wasn't initially, when it was just a couple of thousand, wasn't initially like flagged as a cyber incident, because as you said, it looks like there's just something wrong with the system. But they get you involved when it kind of started accelerating sort of exponentially up, or did they have you in beforehand looking at it on the basis of like, there's something a little bit weird here. Let's go and like take a look at that,
Yeah,
because
so
just in case.
so I was actually helping out in their SOC at the time. We were upgrading their SOC, and it was just a random meeting that we were pulled into, and we didn't really expect anything from it. But then it was
Mhm.
like, oh wait, hold on, this is like really bad, and so that's the thing about incident response. Oftentimes, like, yes, we have SOCs and we have all these detection mechanisms that are supposed to work, but the reality is a lot of times they don't work, and you just kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah, that's absolutely wild that simply that wasn't even picked up, that that cookie was getting exploited, the brute forcing was there, because I mean presumably you could set up some kind of monitoring for that wasn't there, it would seem, or somebody wasn't seeing, that wasn't flashing a big enough alert in somebody's face.
Right. So in this case, like a web application firewall would have worked, but I think what was maybe new at the time, it wasn't really new in the industry, but just new for this company, was like the idea of, we want this process to work, but like maybe we shouldn't let 300,000 requests through. Maybe we should just do like 1,000 at most,
Mm.
which
Maybe
seems
you should rate
obvious.
limit, right? Like,
Yeah.
a little bit. Oh man, that's great.
Yeah, but that's the thing. A lot of organizations, everybody misses something simple, and that's why it's always important to bring in an expert to really figure out what's going on. You always think, oh, it's just I don't need to worry about cybersecurity. If something happens, then I'll just like sue the guy, or like they'll go to jail. And it's like, no, not really. The reality is you'll probably catch them too late, and you probably will never figure out who did it.
Especially if it's a nation state, you might even not even be able to get, even if you can figure out who it is, you're not necessarily going to be able to get after them, because they'll be in a different jurisdiction anyway, and Putin's not going to extradite any of his guys.
Right. Oftentimes they're hired to do this. And so actually, like, with this one, once we did set up the rate limit, they didn't stop, because there's ways around that too. We made it harder for them, but like, once they know that this is a revenue source for organized crime, they're just going to keep coming back. And so for a bank, it's obvious what threat actors are after, but in other organizations, it's maybe not so clear. But oftentimes there are ways to make money off of any organization that is exposed.
Yeah, I'm curious, what was the way that they started getting around that rate limit?
So what they started doing was they would change their IP address. So yeah, so you just have like a specified IP block from another country, like let's say China, and they'll just go through like 200 IPs and just go cycle through them. Um, and there's so many IPs that they can use, and you can just buy more public IPs. The
Of
other
course, yeah.
issue. Mhm.
I was going to say, yeah, because you don't want to, if you get a certain or sudden, for whatever reason, influx of potential actual legitimate business, you don't want to block them out just because you've got some sort of cyber issue. So it's kind of, so your rate limit's like X number per IP, then, isn't it? And that's how, there's a limit there, and then you say, well, we're doing that, it will stop some malicious activity, but we're not going to stop, like, just in case 10,000 people happenstance all want to apply for a loan at the same time. Unlikely as it may be, but could
Right.
happen, or
Well,
within the same half-hour period or whatever.
right. Well, it's just a loan pre-approval. So a lot of these are going out. I mean, these are loan pre-approvals are, they do a credit check. I think it's a soft credit check. And so people are doing them quite frequently. And by IP though, I mean, you wouldn't want like more than one, right? Like, why would you request this like 30 times? But there are sometimes people fill out the form wrong and they resubmit it. So you got to find a way to, yeah, exactly. So you got to find a way to balance like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
Did they learn any sort of lessons around? Because it's very easy for the business to look at cybersecurity, look at the IT function, or like just say, oh, it's part of IT. Those guys know how that stuff works. Fob that off to them, but with minimal kind of like consideration or insufficient consideration for the fact that IT doesn't necessarily know the business processes. So you actually do need, it's the BISO role, the business infosec officer. Did they learn any lessons about like, yeah, maybe we should have more kind of business representation in some of these processes, so that actually the finance guys and the credit checkers, or like the credit decisioning guys actually look at it and go, oh yeah, I can see how that would be exploited. Maybe we should limit that, put those kind of rate limits on and things like that.
Yeah, so for this particular case, they didn't have, at least I didn't meet any sort of BISO. I mean, I was on the call with their CISO. I mean, this wasn't a huge bank, right? Like most larger banks will have their own incident response team or their own internal SOC. And so I think like these smaller institutions, they're trying to get away with a lot more for a lot less money, because that's you cut costs to make profit. And I think that like oftentimes you're right. IT and even like the dev team may not understand what are the risks of cybersecurity, and so like very few organizations have that level of staff.
And one thing I wanted to double back on, because I think it was a really good point, and this is something even we face in our 9 to 5, right? And you hear all the time. So nation state actors are now, or have been, targeting folks of all sizes.
Yes,
in your experience, you're starting to see. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So I think most organizations kind of think like, oh, I'm just a small company, like nobody's going to come after me. And to some extent, that's kind of true. Like, yeah, I mean, ransomware groups, they'll target anybody because they just want to make their money, but they're not going to take a huge ransom because they make money if you stay in business. But with these advanced persistent threats, these groups, they're after information, and sometimes you may not even realize you've been breached, but they've just stolen information from you. And at least in the US, we do have like a lot of companies that do business with the federal government or do business with state governments, and so those companies aren't really under the same level of regulation as the actual government, and so it's an easy spot for these threat actors to enter. And oftentimes they will actually use these smaller organizations to pivot because they know that there's connections to other organizations, or if they, let's say they're go after some kind of provider for, let's say, like Teams, right? If they compromise Teams, then they can access anybody who uses Teams. I'm not saying Teams is compromised, but my point is, you go after a provider, you can access all of their clients.
And I mean, they will, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like Teams itself that is compromised, is it really? Because if somebody's got lax controls on, it's that shared responsibility model. If somebody's got lax controls on their teams as the customer for it, that's one of those ways in. That's only taking insufficiently educated end user allowing access to file shares, things like that. And you're finding information that you can use to pivot and work your way around, move laterally in the network and escalate your privileges, right?
Right, exactly. And so that's why when you work with vendors, it's so important to vet with that, what the security looks like with that vendor. But oftentimes like bigger organizations just don't have that level of control over their vendors, and it's just not something that they can do.
Yeah.
So from your standpoint, I'm a medium business, right? Let's go middle of the road. And I got to set up, I have a sack of money to either set up like a better login and monitoring capability or vetting my third parties, right? And like, sadly, this is a decision that a lot of folks do have to make, right? So I wanted you to weigh in. Like, which way would you go and why?
Yeah, so I guess like it's going to depend on what compliance frameworks you're working under. Like you may have something that says you need to have a SOC and you need these requirements met by your SOC. But if that's not the case, then that may change their answer, because I do think the like figuring out what vendors are doing is oftentimes more important, but you also need like bare minimum logging. Like I think the reality is like the question you asked, like I have this much money, what do I spend it on? A lot of times of what my business does is we talk about like actually a lot of the things we do can be completely free, and it's just how do we organize our staff to handle it appropriately. So that's actually what my company does, is like building it in a more cost-effective way for these businesses.
So they don't have to make those decisions. And you're absolutely right, right? Like more and more, the supply chain is just, it's everywhere, right? Like there's, you don't even know who you're connected to, right? Who they're connected to. And as you said, sometimes the compliance frameworks are not only asking you to vet your third party, but like how about, right, fourth party, nth party type situations where, and at the end of the day, if it's fourth, fifth, or sixth party, if it gets to you and you're cooked, right? Like you're facing the, you're on the hook for the type of potential regulatory and reputational damage.
Exactly. But like it's hard to manage like upstream that much, right? Like fifth or sixth is it happens, but it's
you're into Kevin Bacon numbers at some point, aren't you? Where it's like, actually, once you get to six, everybody's connected to everybody else anyway. So, but that's such a many to many kind of relationship scenario that it's like, yeah, no, that's not cost effective.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm getting there that, as far as to Omar's question about, what do you spend your money on? It's like there's a lot there that is, it's a compliance and governance sort of piece to begin with. Not so much compliance explicitly, but it's like it's a governance. It's having your house in order, getting your ducks in a row, knowing what you've got where, and actually, all that really expensive technical expertise where you can really run up the bill for those people who really are good at this stuff. You could potentially have a relatively secure environment without needing to go that far.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it really all goes back to like, what are your attack surfaces? And like you said, with governance, I think like if you're a smaller organization or even like medium size, you really need to listen to what your CISO says. And if you don't have one, if you can't afford one, then you need to talk to a consultant of some kind who specializes in governance and compliance first, because ultimately, like if you are going for, let's say you're, operating with, we want to do work with the federal government, you need to answer those questions, and your consultant will help you get there. And then ultimately, like my services with incident response come later. Like you need to have an IR retainer, sure, but like, is that the first thing you need? Probably not.
It's so funny that you say this, because I've encountered, I mean, I've done some freelance work, and I've encountered organizations that have done exactly this. They've gone and got the incident responders on the retainer, but didn't even have an acceptable use policy, and they caught somebody logging onto websites that they should not have been using work equipment. And I get a text one day after, I think I was kind of like, well, I was getting at this guy who had hired me for some initial, actually unrelated work. It was like some handyman stuff, and was talking to him about that because I knew that he managed the IT piece. And I said, have you got these policies and things like that? Because he was a cloud guy. He had some appreciation for the security piece, but it wasn't his bread and butter. And so I said to him, it's like, have you got this? He goes, talk to our chief admin guy. Chief admin guy says, oh yeah, we've got incident response on retainer. And I was like, yeah, you that feels like you're putting the cart before the horse, but okay, when you're ready for policies, I'll let you and other documentation and stuff like that, I'll let you reach out to me. And this guy Melvin gives me a text. He goes, yeah, about those policy things. I was like, well, do you want to give me a heads up as to what's triggered the need? He goes, I don't really want to write it down. I'll give you a call. And he's like, yeah, they were looking at spicy things. I was like, there you go, that's the one.
Yeah. Well, it's always something like that. Like I think people think like, okay, well, I have an IR retainer or I have an IR team. They'll do everything. And it's like no, like that is like for emergencies. Like this is like if everything goes completely wrong, then you have this.
And like an IR team on retainer as well. Like if you're expecting them to do some of the more routine day-to-day like documentation and governance type stuff, that's a really expensive way to get that kind of stuff done.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not totally saying that the expertise for even documentation is cheap, because actually, that's a skilled piece of work, and to be able to tailor it to the organization's risk appetite. But it's cheaper than your incident response.
Well, yeah, but a lot of these companies too, they'll just go like, I have insurance, I have cyber insurance, and that's not enough either. But often, like, I don't know, like oftentimes, how big was that company?
Now, the few hundred people, like renewable energy stuff, I think over a few hundred people across like 2 offices. So I wasn't entirely surprised that they didn't have that sort of stuff, because I think they only had like, at this point, there was 1, maybe 2 people dealing with the IT stuff. And at that stage, you really are in a position of, they're after the functionality, they're after having it really set up to be able to do business. And then it's really one of those things like, okay, well, at some point now we need you IT guy to do some security bits, but
Right.
he's not an actual security guy.
Right, and I think around that size, like like 300 to 500, you realize you need your first security people, and that's when you you get a lot of the bad things like that with, like you said, with the acceptable use policy.
It's almost like it's not even, because as you said, Quinlan, right? Like you even come in and you go, hey, there's a ton of stuff we could do hygiene wise, right, or best practice wise. It's not gonna break the bank or even cost you anything, but it's more a matter of I'm not gonna hire an electrician to fix my plumbing, right? I'm not gonna hire a plumber, right, to do my landscaping, right? Like it's like there's specializations,
What to do your carpentry.
right, like for a reason. I mean, some people try to get away with it, right? Like there's like listen, that's the one person that does all my stuff, and then you end up with horrific angles cut into your drywall, and you're like, this looks terrible. Like I'm mad that I have to stare at it. And yes, I am actually looking at just such an example, because I bought the house and apparently a blind person put up some of the drywall. So that's very like a personal thing there. But like it's and you do, right? Like you're the security person, so you can handle all of it. No, it's not how it works. Like it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their specialisms.
Sure.
You mentioned the cyber insurance piece, which I think all 3 of us here are all too aware that gets leaned on far too much, and like all varieties of insurance is the sort of thing that said insurance company is going to move heaven and earth actually not to pay out on.
Yeah.
Have you seen any instances where, like, because some cyber insurance will actually come with their own expertise that get brought in to help deal with the situation? Have you seen any instances of it being like surprisingly good or particularly shit?
Yeah, I've seen both. So there's been times where I've been pulled off of incidents and they've gone like, well, we have our own team, so you need to stand down. On some of those, I've ended up staying on with the client to kind of help them through the process. One of them in particular was like, she was like it was a tiny company. It was just her, and she did like law stuff and real estate, and she didn't really know what she was doing. She like she knew how to do her job. She didn't want to have a huge company, but she did have to have cyber insurance because of the work she did. And yeah, and it was just this like weird scenario where somebody got some like she had a client that she did like she sold them a home, and when they did the wire transfer to wire all the money, they sent it to like a criminal instead, like a scammer. And so I stayed on with her because they thought she had been hacked, and that maybe like the wire instructions came from her email or something. I don't remember the exact scenario, but cyber insurance was involved. They didn't need to be, and they said, you need to hire our forensics investigator. And she hired them, and she's like, oh, well, my insurance is covering it, so it's fine. I don't need to pay for this. But they actually said like, well, you weren't breached, so now you owe us like $3,000,
Oh, no.
which for a one-person shop, that's a lot of money.
That's terrible.
Huge.
That's absolutely
Yeah.
terrible, especially when you're not expecting it and you're thinking, listen, my premiums are covering this, right? Like, do they hire the forensics person if they know it's out of pocket, right? Like, that's a different calculus potentially.
Right.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
so she was so she was forced to pay for this, unfortunately. And she just, she's just kind of like an old lady. She's like, I don't know about computers. I know about selling homes though. I know how to do law stuff, you know. Um
It's awful.
yeah, it was, I mean, it's horrible for her. And they mandated it. They said you need to do forensics. And I told them, like, I was like, I've looked at this. I know she doesn't need to do forensics. Her partner may have been compromised, but it wasn't her.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of those situations. But I mean, that specific kind of scenario with the interception of closing documentation, communication, getting in the middle of that. It's basically there's a real estate man in the middle attack, isn't it? At the end of the day, and it's
Well, it's
getting
phishing. Yeah.
yeah, it's phishing. It's the sit there, impersonate right in the middle of the process, get that $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 worth of deposit money and down payment money, and then make off into the sunset, never to be seen again. But it's at the end of the day, it's like, it absolutely does not surprise me. I've dealt with enough realtors and interacted with enough of them to know how on the ball cyber-wise are you, or is your mind purely on sell the home, sell the home, sell the home? But getting into that and saying, like, okay, trying to do the convincing is to say, like, this is a really important thing because you're a massive target, because you deal in tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars payments in any one go, and you're probably managing, like, I don't know how often realtors close, like, maybe like one every week or two or something like that, maybe a couple a week if they're really, really good. That's a lot of opportunities, and especially if you're not on the ball about making sure that your clients know what the expectations are from you with that kind of correspondence.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, like, with that scenario, like, my job wouldn't be to help her clients. I was just doing I was doing forensics, or I was reviewing her security posture. But I've also worked in cases with cyber insurance where they were okay with us doing it. They I don't know how. Actually, I was working on it with one of my partners, Brush Cyber. And I don't know how he negotiated that with them, but the insurance was willing to work with us. And but they had, like, all of these rules. There was all these stipulations, like with health insurance. It's the same thing where it's like, yeah, you can have surgery, but you're not going to get a great surgeon. It's going to be like a crappy surgeon.
That's so terrifying, though. Like, if you really think about it, like, yeah, we'll cover it, but like, it's this dude that went to, like, University of Samoa, and shout out, like, maybe there's a great medical program in the University of Samoa. Like, I don't want to shit on that.
We're gonna get the Samoans in the comments.
Listen, I'm
just the wailing.
It's the Better Call Saul, right? Like, that's supposedly where he went to law school. It was fake. That's where I got that from. All right, that's it. But yeah, like you said that
covering your bases
brilliantly. Like, you'll get covered, but maybe it's some butcher that's gonna, like, ooh, it's my first surgery. Oh man, that's
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I was like the out-of-network surgeon in a way where they're like, yeah, like, we're only going to pay you, like, up to this amount and, like, this many hours, and you're going to have to justify it and write all these reports. But I mean, they did cover it.
That whole thing, it just reminds me, it's like, you ever hear the adage, like, what do you call a doctor who graduated bottom of his class?
What?
Doctor. And there's no differentiation. You can actually be a really, really crappy doctor, and it's like, oh, it's still graduated from some prestigious medical school. It's like, yeah, he scraped by.
Now my sister's an MD, and sometimes, like, she would say, yeah, like, we would meet people from her class and be like, yeah, I don't know how they graduated. I'm like, that's terrifying.
Yeah,
that is, like, just for somebody, it's one thing, like, if you're in high school and you kind of, okay, like, they're not about this life. Let them do what they're gonna do, but like, not medical school, right?
Well,
like,
yeah, but it's like with cyber insurance though too. Like, they're oftentimes if it's like ransomware, they're paying out the threat actor, so they're actually incentivizing the threat actor to come back.
Yep.
So, like,
this has always been the great argument against, and I mean, like, not good argument, but like the big argument against cyber insurance, or at least the ransomware protection on cyber insurance, because actually, like you say, it does incentivize the activity, because they know that it's like, well, the potential victim might be doing what they should, because they don't really want to, they don't want to incur the pain of going through one of those incidents. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, oh well, if you do get in and you manage to ransomware them, you're not going to have that much of a fight on your hands. Yes, you'll have to negotiate with one of the adjusters from the actual insurance firm, but that you're probably going to get something, as opposed to said victim actually having the ducks in a row from a backup and resilience perspective and going, yeah, swivel.
Yeah, so like actually on that point, like, and it's not just ransomware, any type of cyber attack, you call them and you go, yeah, we got hacked, sorry. But like with the real estate client I was talking about, they were like, well, so it doesn't happen again, you should enable MFA. And it's like, okay, but like she already had MFA, and like
that's their
that's it?
prescription. Like that's their big, like, here, this is what's gonna save you. MFA. And you're sitting there, right, as the cyber professional, Quinlan, going, that's not enough. Like, what are you doing?
There's no silver bullets, but here is one.
Yeah.
Here's a normal bullet with painted silver.
And that's the insurance folks, right? Like, and the thing I caught too, right, Quinlan, you were saying, like, they'll pay out the threat actor and they're nickel and diming you. Right. They're
exactly.
going, show me receipts, and I want, log into this thing to show the hours, right? Like, set the timer, and all the hoops they make you jump through, right, to justify. That's silly.
Yeah, I hate those timer things.
Yeah, no, listen, I was exposed to it once, not even here, right? Like another job, doing cyber, but like starting out, and I want to say, like, everyone just revolted. Like,
Really?
they tried it with us. Yeah. Oh yeah. They're like, oh, no, be sure to click here, and then when you start working on so and so we can, track the amount of work you're doing on the tickets. And we're like, okay.
Is this like the lawyers charging by the 6 minutes kind of thing?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in this industry that does happen, because we sometimes, like, it's this like weird intersection where I'm not a lawyer, I might work with lawyers, the consultants we work with might have a legal background, and so sometimes my clients do want it in 15-minute increments or in whatever amount of minutes. But I would say, like, the vast majority, it's just by hour. The vast majority of the work, I'll just be like, yeah, I mean, we did 7 hours of work, but it was really 6 hours and 57 minutes or something.
So this is your bad cyber stuff. Was there anything that was especially, like, surprisingly good? Bad insurance. Was there anything that was surprisingly good?
Like, of insurance agencies?
Yeah, in terms of, like, how they approached it.
No.
I was hoping you were gonna say that. I could see you were getting ready to be like, I'm gonna hit him with the fat NO. Like, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, because it's the same game everywhere. Like, that's how they make money. Every single health insurance, like, car insurance, cyber insurance, it's the same shit. They don't want to pay out.
Pet insurance, right?
Yeah,
everything. Make a claim, right? Like, my little homie's about to die. Well, sorry, your payment was 10 seconds late.
Your payment was 10 seconds late, and this was a pre-existing medical condition.
I'm thinking about a specific thing. Like, there's no, that was fun.
I don't know about the rest of you. My pet insurance rocks. My French isn't well like that. Is there? So actually, I mean, adjacent to the cyber insurance piece, I remember we had somebody in our day job, somebody talk at our day job about they'd been through a ransom. It was a hospital in Maryland. They'd been through a ransomware incident. Their CIO said, because I think that the perception always is that actually once you've got the feds involved, that actually things are going to be okay and they'll be really good with it. And he said, as much as we've just established the cyber insurance isn't always that fantastic from a response perspective, he goes, the feds were completely useless. They came in, they kind of did a bit of a recce round, figured out what the situation was, and then we're like, well, okay, fine, bye. And that was that. Have you been with incidents where feds have had to get involved? Or No.
Yes and no. So oftentimes, like by the time they are involved, it's kind of out of my hands, and so you'll kind of see this in the industry where like people want to do their due diligence before involving the feds because they know once they get involved, they may shut down the investigation, they may delay it, they may stop business altogether, and you really don't want that to happen as a business. Like you do not want a 3-month investigation because really for what is you restore from backups and you get back up and running 24 hours later and lose a few thousand in business. That's different than, shut down for a few months or have like feds snooping around on everything. But there have been cases. I mean, one of the ones I was telling you about before this with this, supposed like satanic hacker that was involved with feds, and that just kind of got disappeared. Like that's just, in the sense that like once they got involved, I don't know what happened. It just like was taken to another department, disappeared. But then then also you have like the real estate one where like that the real estate broker the client lost like a few $100,000, and in that case feds got involved and they just went like, oh well, that sucks, we'll look into this in like 6 months.
Like sucks to be because, out a couple $100,000.
Yeah, because it happens to everybody, and
6 months.
They're not there to help you get your money back. They're there to stop the criminals from operating altogether, and you probably won't get the money back even if they do that.
That's why I just can't fathom how there is not more focus on real estate cyber, because it's just not a thing that gets talked about. But it's one of those things that you hear the horror stories on Reddit about. Oh, I lost my 70,000 deposit, and it's like, damn, how does this happen?
It's just this like weird place. Like a lot of like real estate agents are, like real estate brokers and agents are two different things. And agents are oftentimes like subcontracted to like, let's say like, what's the one that Warren Buffett owns?
Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah. So Berkshire Hathaway is a perfect example. Like, yeah, they're secure, but it's because they subcontract everything out, and the subcontractors, if they get breached, and it's like, well, that's a subcontract. That's not our problem. And so like it's everywhere in real estate. Actually, in many different sorts of organizations, it's the same thing where the agent is not really their concern, and the broker is, because the broker is the one that manages the money and does those sorts of like legal things. And so that's why I think it's not really discussed. And a lot of times like brokers are pretty big.
I just think because it is. I mean, there's a insurance, traditional insurance in itself is that operates on one of those kind of models where it's a bit of like a franchise deal, and it's like there's an agent for a town for State Farm, and there's one for farmers, and there's one for such another bit, and I get what you mean now, because it's there's a central system, and then there's all the little bits on the outside, and as long as the central thing isn't compromised, and like you say, they themselves don't really necessarily care all that much, do they? Because the kingdom is still largely secure.
Right. And that's so, in my opinion, like that's why it gets overlooked, because they'll go like, yeah, so you own your own independent insurance agency and you white label under State Farm, but like State Farm wasn't hacked, so like who cares?
And they won't say that. Like the minute that happens, it's like, well, that sucks for you, independent contractor person, right? Like you should probably tell your people that their stuff got stolen, but it wasn't, and don't say it was us. Yeah, no, precisely.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just like a regulatory thing. Like most organizations participate in cybersecurity because of regulatory requirements, and that's it.
Yeah. Sadly, you're spot on, right? If there's not like a legal stick poking, or even what we saw with GDPR, right? When that first came out, everybody was like, okay, cool, right? There you go. Yeah, like, but then when people started getting fined, like hard fined, right? Then folks go, oh, this is serious? You guys were serious about this? Wait a second. And then now, right? Like now it has teeth, right?
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, no, but that took a while. That took like 5-10 years of like, okay, GDPR, that's cute. Privacy, who cares? And then somebody's like, wait a second, billions of dollars? Hold on. Maybe I should care.
It's still pretty prevalent. I mean, depending on your size, you small enough, you still think the GDPR is just some sort of a joke, because largely speaking, I mean, it's one of those things where the likelihood of actually getting found out of having broken it and getting punished for it is reasonably low. because it might actually cost the EU more to pursue you on it than it'd actually be worth them in fines because you're not big enough.
That's not legal
for it.
advice. Hold on, I'm gonna say
No,
Quinlan,
no,
I'm gonna get us out.
that's a good
Quinlan's
point.
got nothing to do with that statement. Neither do I, even Robin. Like, GDP.
I'm not a lawyer. It's not legal.
Regulators, please. That was solely Robin's opinion. Get out of here. Small enough to skirt around GDPR. Man, madness.
Don't give me that look. Honestly, I've been on the receiving end of it. Be like, I've been stonewalled. This is when I was still working over here, but still employed in the UK. And I had to go for some physiotherapy, and I got absolutely straight up stonewalled by this physio outfit because I think they just IP blocked their website. So I just couldn't get in from outside the US. So I couldn't get the details. I had works insurance harping at me going like, look, I can't get hold of them. If you got US offices or something like that, by all means you go for them, but this is out of my hands. And I think it's just because they were like, nah, don't want to deal with the European stuff. It was nuts.
Yeah. Well, like during breaches, something similar happens where it's like, oh, well, like we kind of got breached, but like not really. Like maybe we'll just ask the staff lawyer what to do, and they'll be like, oh, just don't report it. It's not a big deal. And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, sure, that was legal advice from an actual lawyer, but it was like one lawyer, and like
there was one lawyer who graduated bottom of his class, and he's still called a lawyer
from the University of American Samoa, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the law school of Samoa. Oh man, yeah.
That actually reminded me. I wanted to ask earlier. Temporarily forgot. When you come into an investigation, and it's something that's happened. It's something that's happened specifically on someone's machine, terminal, phone, whatever. And because I've provided the kind of advice I'm about to say before, but I don't think it's immediately apparent to most people. When something weird's happening and it definitely starts looking cybery, put it down, leave it alone, back away. How many times have you come into something where you've gone, oh, why did you do that? Like, this could have been so much easier had you not screwed around with it after you figured out that there was something weird going on.
Yeah, I would say on almost every incident, something like that happens. Like,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, because like I've seen this happen in Fortune 50 organizations because like I've seen CISOs do silly things. I've seen people in other departments do silly things. But like, for example, you got breached, the hacker's doing something on this device, but you don't know what they're doing. Should you unplug it? Absolutely not. Do not fucking touch it. But but when you don't know and you're like, I just want my business to survive, you're like, fuck, I should just pull it really quick because you're just thinking with adrenaline and you're not planning it out. And that happens all the time, not just with like chain of custody and like preserving evidence, stuff like that, but just like there's been times where another department will go, oh, you told us that it was like a scary cyber thing, so we just like deleted it. Like, no, you don't just you can't just like turn off an AWS instance or like throw away a computer because something happened. Like
just beat up the tower and the problem's gone.
Well, yeah, well, like with this case with the mailroom, they were like, well, we just stopped sending the mail to customers. Great. And then we also, then the mailroom decided they're going to run the investigation based on, because they just thought that's what they should do. And, they start interfering with things, and that's not appropriate, but they don't know that.
And yeah, and to a certain extent, I mean, it's fair. You can't act on a scenario when you don't have a full, or you can't act in an ideal manner on a scenario where you don't actually yet have the understanding of what's going on. But you kind of have to, sometimes you kind of have to poke around in it a little bit in the first place to figure out that it's going on, and then you go, oh well, shouldn't have done that, but we didn't know at the time that we shouldn't have done that. So it's like a catch-22. At least they had the actual initiative to say like, oh well, we'll run this even if it was wrong.
Yeah, I will say,
most people would be like, that's a hot potato, no.
Yeah, true.
And it wouldn't get dealt with.
I remember I came on the call and I was like, wait, I'm sorry, who are you? And she was like, oh, I work in the mailroom. And I was like, you're in an incident call with 50 people and you're like from the mailroom? Like
that would be like on my bingo card for the year. Quinlan. Like I'd have to be like, yes, I was actually on a call for somebody from the goddamn mailroom. It's like, I got this. Hold on. And you've got like all sorts of like technical folks on there, and they're like, no, wait. It happened in my domain, but were they at least like, did they at least acquiesce eventually, or did they try to, because sometimes that can get weird, right? Like even in a like a room full of tech folks, right? The IR team comes on and it's like, hey, listen, this is ours now. Sometimes even tech folks will start to get weird.
Oh.
Did they at least let you work then? Like they got out of the way, or?
At that organization, there were a lot of times where we had to kind of be like, "This is ours, fuck off." And I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
No,
but,
that's
You're fine.
okay.
We're easy. Yeah.
Please.
yeah, but like with this one, it was the same thing. She was like, "I was doing this. Why are you getting involved? Who are you?" And then we have to be like, "No, like the executive is like two steps above me. Like listen to what we say. We do cybersecurity, and it's
I didn't
not
tell you how to do
uncommon.
mail.
That's right.
Yeah, not to be like just go back to the fucking mailroom, like, but like do that.
But please, in this instance, I would appreciate it if you would at least let me cook. Right? This is
Yeah.
my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like this happens like with networking teams too, where like maybe the network team finds something and or they don't take it seriously. Like when you say we need this thing blocked, they'll go like, why? What do you mean why? Like, because we told you to do it. Like, just go do it. And
I'll explain
It's always-
after if you like, but just do it now.
Yeah.
well, exactly. And I think that's pretty common. Like, especially at larger organizations, like incident response becomes like you need to get these people to trust you. You may never see them again because the organization's so big and you're just like jumping through all these different teams. And yeah.
Have you seen really quickly, because I do want to give some time to shout out like where people can get a hold of you, kind of do the business plug thing. But last question, at least for me, did you find that folks would stonewall you more in that way, like if there was no IR plan or no set of IR playbooks, or did it not matter? Was like, did ego just get in the way no matter what?
I don't think I would say most of the time the IR plan doesn't really even come into the picture, like at any stage of this. Like I think that it's important to have one for compliance reasons, but overall, playbooks, IR plans, all that stuff, like when something happens, you're throwing it out the window and running on adrenaline 95% of the time.
That's good that's a big one right there, right? Because everyone holds it up and it's like, hey, we have a playbook, we're set. And it's like, well, have you tried it? Have you tested it? Or do you have ice in the veins if something goes sideways? If any of those are a no, like you're just gonna lose your shit when something does happen, right? Like, yeah.
Which I do find kind of like a little bit interesting. And I guess what I'm about to say, it's sort of it supports and also goes against the point that my wife decided to put on Sully a few weeks ago, and obviously it's right at the beginning where they have the bird strike, they get out the manual, they go through the stuff, and he kind of just decides to, and in aviation, and it's always the classic example industry that's used for procedure, like do it by the book because we've investigated this to the nth degree and this is what we should do. And in many cases that does work and that does save lives, it stops plane coming down. And they do that. It's typically not the kind of scenario where they'll just go, oh, just throw that out the window but that's such a generally speaking such a controlled system. Do you think that that's the difference between the two? Like one, you've got a piece of machinery, several tens of millions of dollars worth piece of equipment that's specifically been designed to do certain things in certain ways, and so going through this, like that does make sense going step, except what Sullenberger did, which was like, nah, all the way down, do this in first, versus cyber where it's like actually there's so much that's probably outside of your control that actually that is where it's like, okay, no, just deal with this that's right in front of our face right now.
Yeah, so what I try to tell people is like I'm like a digital Sherlock Holmes or something where I don't have all the pieces. At any organization, I'm not going to have all of the pieces. There's a general like operating procedure I have, but like you got to listen to your clues. And so like a lot of times like the playbook is not going to have the clues in it. You're going to have to go figure out what those clues are, and sometimes it's just a guess and you're going to have to take a few guesses.
Fair enough. Sage advice. Okay, so where we're pretty much run out of time here. If people want to get hold of you, enlist your services, where can people go? How can they get to you?
Sure. Just Google my name, which is, I guess, maybe up here, Quinlan Varcoe. You'll find everything about me. I've made my brand really focused around my name. My company is called Blueberry Security. Our website's blueberrysecurity.net, and we handle all sorts of incident response and SOC transformation for any size business, but IR is any size, and SOC transformation is like medium to enterprise.
Excellent stuff. Wonderful. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today. That was really, really interesting, and I'm sure. Well, I know you've got plenty of other stories, so we'd be delighted to have you back again in the future whenever we can sort that out. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.
You too. Bye.